Am I a strong person? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Are you a strong person? Who knows? Only you know the answer to that. When I would go through difficult or challenging things in my life, I would occasionally encounter someone who would tell me, "You're so strong. I could never do that." And what was intended to be a compliment didn't always make me feel that great about myself, because what I would hear is that somehow it was easier for me to go through that difficult experience or overcome that challenge because I was a strong person. It made me feel as though my ability to overcome those difficult situations or those challenges in life was because I had something special that they didn't have, and that maybe they thought it was easier for me. It wasn't. I think today we're going to talk about what it means to be strong, how we become strong, and how that perception of strength is always based on our individual experiences.
I got that a lot too. You're so strong. And I, most of the time, did not take that as a compliment. And I think for the same reasons that you just stated. So I like that we're having a conversation about this.
I think one of the most important things that we can remember as we're going through life and we're facing challenges or difficulties is that none of us are born with anything special that makes us strong or weak, but we all have an opportunity to make choices, to voluntarily take on a challenge that seems overwhelming, that seems like too much, to face that challenge and to be okay with the outcome. Whether we succeed or we don't, we've learned something for sure. And we have, by taking on the challenge, become stronger and better able to take on the next challenge. Was there ever a time that you remember feeling consciously aware of the fact that maybe you were strong because you had chosen to take on those difficult tasks and challenges and had perhaps been successful at them?
I don't think that I realized that until after Lance died. I just was trying to get through my days, day after day after day after day, just trying to do everything that I could to make life as good for him as possible. And then after he died and I looked back, I went, oh my gosh, how did I ever make it through all of that? And that was when I realized how strong I had become because of everything that I had been through. But I didn't find it helpful to have people tell me that I was strong. It almost felt dismissive to me when somebody would say that while I was taking care of Lance.
I think I had similar experiences when people would say that to me. And like I said, I think it felt that way because it almost suggested that it was somehow easier for me to go through these situations than it would be for someone else. Because what I would often hear is, "You're so strong, I could never do that." It was upsetting to some degree because I wanted to say, well, yes, you could if you chose to. It
Yep.
wasn't easy for me. I didn't take these things on because I am strong. I became strong because I took these things on, because I um, voluntarily addressed those challenges or hardships or difficulties. I wasn't taking them on because I was strong. I became strong because I was taking them on.
One of the things that you said is when people would say, I could never do that, my answer to them was always, you don't know what you can do until you have to do it. Because I would say probably if you would have told me 20 years before Lance got sick that I was going to be doing all the things that I did, I probably would have said the same thing. I could never do that. But you never know what you can do until you're put to the test.
That's 100% true. And sometimes you're surprised by those things. I'll never forget as a personal trainer, I remember working with a client that I had for, it was probably well over a year. We would just do the exercises and I would see her progress and I could see her getting stronger. I could see her form getting better. I could see her endurance getting better. And I don't know that she saw it because she was just coming and doing the same things. And I'll never forget her coming in one day and she was so excited to tell me that she had done some gardening that week and had gone to the store and had purchased some potting soil. And she couldn't believe when she picked up this 50-pound bag of potting soil, how easily she was able to move it. She said she was blown away to the point that she thought, that must not be a 50-pound bag. And she said she was able to move it with such ease. She realized how much stronger she'd gotten. That's the point. When these challenges come at us, when these difficulties come at us, and sometimes they're just situations that we're in that are uncomfortable or that we're unfamiliar with or that are new. When we say to ourselves, let's try it, let's go. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't feel equipped. I don't feel able. I don't feel strong. But we take on that challenge anyway. The result is that you will become stronger, whether you're successful or not, whether it turns out the way you thought it was going to, you're going to be stronger. And I think you experience that probably on a daily basis.
Probably. But I think one of the things is hearing it from other people saying you're so strong. I think it depends on the context, who it's coming from, how they're saying it. That there were some people who definitely were acknowledging the fact that I was becoming stronger because of all the things that I had been through. But then there were other people who were saying it just like I said, it just felt very dismissive.
What are some other ways that people could express that same sentiment in a way that is honest coming from them, but that also feels like an encouragement to the caregiver or to the person that they're attempting to compliment?
I think maybe saying something like, you are resilient. That was something that I heard a lot. And that made a lot more sense to me than you are so strong. And it didn't feel like I was being dismissed. There were also times that somebody said it to me when I was just talking about how hard the situation was. And that's really, I think, what made it feel dismissive to me was, you've got this, or you're so strong, you can do it. It was just very dismissive of what I was going through. So instead of saying something like that to avoid talking about whatever the conversation is, maybe say something like, I can see how tough this is for you. And just acknowledging that you see that it is a challenging situation, or offering to be there. I'm here if you need to talk. Or I can see that this is really hard. How are you coping? Just things like that. Was there anything that would have helped you in your situation?
I think the same thing, just throughout life, anytime I've gone through anything difficult or challenging, I think what has been most impactful to me is when people just acknowledge that a situation is hard by just saying, oh my gosh, that sounds awful. And then that allows me to say, well, you know what, it is awful, but I'm going to keep going. Or it is awful, but I think I'm going to make it. It allows me to respond specifically to the situation and think about how I plan to navigate it or get through it. I think just hearing that oh my gosh, that sounds hard. That sounds awful. Wow, that sounds like a lot. Then allows me to feel heard and to think about how I am going to move forward. I think something that's important to remember as we're talking about this topic is that you're going to be in different places in your life. And like for you, RuthAnn, I feel like there were many times or a span of time when you were really just hanging on by threads, trying to survive the minutes and hours, not even thinking about days or weeks, maybe. And so it wasn't as if you had anything extra to give. Like you were giving 110% of everything you had. I think for most of us, most of the challenges and difficulties that we're going to go through are not going to be to that extent, um, or at least not all the time. We might go through periods where we're in that moment, but the rest of the time we're just grinding. We're doing the hard things. We're making the hard choices day in and day out, and that in and of itself is exhausting. What I feel like we have an opportunity, and maybe even for some of us, an obligation to do is to turn that around when someone says, "You're so strong, I could never do that." To stop that conversation right there and say, yes, you could. Here's the deal. I wasn't born this way. I didn't come into the world with all this extra strength and ability to take on these challenges. I just did it. I did the hard thing. I made the hard choice, and so can you. If you were faced with this same situation, yes, you could. You could do this because I didn't start out this way. I ended up this way because of the choices I made. And you have the same opportunity of the same 24 hours that I do. You can make those hard choices too. And here's how. Here's how I did it. That's not always a feasible conversation, depending on where you're at in your struggle, your hardship, or your challenge. But I think it's important as humans to share that message with each other.
That wasn't anywhere in my thoughts. I was just trying to survive. But looking back, I can see just how strong I had become because of all the things that I did. And it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't something that I was just born with. These were challenges that I was presented with. And I just did them because they needed to be done. And doing them made me stronger. And so now, when I talk to my friends who are still caregivers or anyone going through a challenging situation, we've talked about having cheerleaders. And I try to be their cheerleader and just encourage people that you don't know what you can do until you are faced with that challenge and you get through it. And then, oh my gosh, looking back to see all the things that you went through and that you overcame, that's huge.
It's absolutely huge. And in addition to being cheerleaders, I've always considered myself a bit of a witness to the people around me. So I'm watching people's lives, and as their life maybe falls into something challenging or difficult, I'm a witness to who they are and what they've done. And I can remind them, wait a minute, remember this time when you did this? Hey, I watched you and you are this way. I can kind of interject into their life what I've seen and what I've witnessed, because I think we forget. We keep a perspective that isn't the same as other people's.
Right. And I think that that's something that was really important for me too, when I was going through all the things that I was going through with Lance, because I was just living right now. I wasn't thinking about anything that had already happened. So when somebody would point out to me, this is what you've already been through, I'd be like, oh, that's right. I have already gone through this. I can do this. So that's a really good point too.
I think it's so important. And I think one of the things, if I can communicate anything through this conversation, it's that none of us are born with these, I would say, kind of life muscles, right? Things that help us get through challenges, difficulties, hardships, help us grow, to help us learn, to help us mature. None of us are born with any of that. It only comes from pushing ourselves past what we know our limits to be and taking on something that we don't think we can do, but trying anyway. None of us are born brave. We just get braver by taking on things that scare us a little bit. So I think the point that I want to get across in this conversation is that you are strong. You just might not know it yet. Well, thanks for having this conversation with me today. I feel like I've been the host instead of the co-host. So fun to switch things up a little bit, but so glad we were able to talk about this and looking forward to our future conversations. So we'll see you next time.
Bye, Jenna.